Setting fonts in your website is an important part of creating a brand identity or transmitting a certain feeling via your website. For example, if you have a serious-looking page, you might consider a heavy-handed sort of serif font, but if you want a more lighthearted approach to your content, you might consider an alternative font done by an independent designer online. Let's look at how to set fonts in CSS. So let's write some CSS to grab each of these elements one by one. Firstly, the element with the ID of serif. Nextly, the element with the ID of sans serif. And lastly, the element with the ID of monospace. I haven't actually filled in any CSS properties yet, so let's go ahead and do so. The way to set fonts in CSS is by using the font family property. You'll notice this little dash in the middle where both font and family are lowercase. You'll fill it out then either with the name of a font or with a generic font group like serif, for example. Now you don't notice any visual changes on this first line because this is actually already in serif font. It means it has those little ticks at the end of each letter. Do you see the ticks on the end of this T? That's called a serif. You'll see the difference when we set this second font family to be sans serif, meaning without serifs. Now you can see a visual difference between this font and this first font. Lastly, you can create an element that has a font family of monospace. This means that each letter takes up the same width no matter which letter it is. Each of these font groups has a slightly different feel to it. So you can choose a generic font group like this, but more often than not, you'll be working with more specific fonts. Now I have a second code pen open here that is the United States Constitution with a lot of different fonts applied to it. You can see that I accomplished this by selecting an element and setting its font family property to a specific font value. Now what's important to know is that a font will only display properly if the user has it installed on their computer. If not, they'll just see the default HTML font, which is not really that attractive. That's why sometimes you should set backup fonts. For example, let's take this paragraph about the House of Representatives. It's just a sans serif font, but I've specified it in my style sheets. I'm going to find the paragraph in my HTML. I can see that it has the ID of section 2.1. So if I find that in my CSS, I've already set the font family equal to Gill Sans, which is very specific. In order to make sure that the user still sees a sans serif font, even if they don't have Gill Sans on their computer, I can simply type a comma and sans serif. While we were working with this example, you also might have noticed that this document is just plain ugly. There are way too many fonts going on. If you can, try not to use more than 3 fonts per page because otherwise you're going to tire out your reader. In the course text below, I've also cited some examples of good font combinations. They'll make your page easier to read and just plain look better.